Okay, welcome then. If we want to start the meeting, have we, I noticed that 2 councillors are missing. Have we had any apologies at all?
We've received an apology from Councillor Bartlett.
Okay. I'm going to make this, any substitutes? Obviously.
We have Councillor Richardson for Councillor Bartlett.
Okay. Are there any declarations of interest?
I don't know what declaration of interest it is, but it's just to declare that I am a member of Deal Town Council. I don't think there's any, I can still go on. But it's just an announcement. I sit on Deal Town Council.
Yeah. Okay. Way better there. Okay, the minutes of the meeting, which was, I think, 2023, wasn't it? Which I think is only Councillor Vincent and myself. Are you happy to agree those, Councillor Vincent? I'm content. So.
My memory is not quite that good, but I'm confident that the Democratic Services team have nailed it. So yes,
I'm sure it was correct. I've had several holidays since then. Okay, so yep. Which then takes us then on to agenda item 5, which is the Community Governance Review Stage 1 responses. Tracy? Oh, you do. Sorry, River.
I'll just introduce briefly and then Tracy will deal with the substance of the report. So as members are aware, Council agreed a CGR based on the numbers of parish and town councillors. That is a 2-part process. This is the conclusion of the first consultation. So we have gone out to consultation to the public, to the towns and parishes, asked for their views. We have provided them with the NOUT numbers as an illustration of what NOUT considers to be an appropriate number of town and parish councillors, though that does not have to be adhered to. And we have the responses back as part of the consultation, which I'll pass on to Tracy in a second to deal with the detail of. We did advise all towns and parishes that of the importance of making a response, whether that was a response to say no change or a response to ask for change. I'll pass over to Tracy now to talk about the detail.
Okay, so we had a fairly decent response to the review, 107 responses altogether. The vast majority seem to want no change overall, but obviously that picture changes depending on which area we're looking at. I have given a summary and recommendations purely based on the responses that we've received, because that is all I can really base it on. I'm not on a town or parish council, and because this is a public consultation, I've tried to go with what the majority of the responses have requested. If, for example, there's the majority have requested too few councillors, then we've had to go in a different direction, because 5 is the minimum number and not 3. A lot of people seem to think that a council can run on 3 councillors. Hopefully this will make it easier for you so that you don't have to go through every single response. But there is the summary is there, and it's for you to decide whether you want to stick with that or go in a different direction.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Chair. I think so. What I'm just going to suggest is that we go through each parish by parish and just sort of validate what's in there, because the circumstances in each of them are all a bit different. Let me just sort of thank Tracy and the team for the work they've done on this, because clearly the kind of the exercise to review the whole of the district's parishes hasn't been done for some time, and I'm sure it's been done very thoroughly, and it's great to see all the data in front of us. Just as an observation on the kind of the point about sort of reflecting what we heard in the consultation, I think that is absolutely right to a point, but if we were to do that, for example, on planning applications, then there's quite a few that wouldn't get approved and probably should be. So sometimes people who take the time to write to us because they've got a particular bugbear that they want to air. So ultimately, as a district council, although we haven't exercised this power in the time that I've been a councillor, ultimately we are in charge in this space to determine the structure of the parish councils. And I think we need to look at the data and, you know, the evidence, and that evidence needs to include, I think, you know, the average number, you know, the numbers of councillors versus the number of people that they represent, because there are some absolutely wild variations in there from, I think, some, you know, in the 20s up to over 1,000. Kind of effectively, you know, it means that the vote of one person in one place counts, you know, 20 times as much as the vote of somebody in another. And I'm not quite sure that sits comfortably with me. The other thing I would just observe, I think, is that there are clearly a number of places where there have not been contested elections, or there are vacancies where there are struggles to fill spots, and that can happen. But if it's happening consistently, I think it's a bit of a farce. If you've got theoretically a dozen seats and you only ever have 9 councillors, then let's right size those councils so that they are working effectively and you've got sensible competition. The other thing I'd say is just, I mean, clearly, I think members will know my views on this. It is a bit of a shame that the scope of the CGR is just on councillor numbers, because I think what's being flushed out through the responses is that there are some real issues around wards, around total council size, around boundaries that people have got views on locally, and that perhaps lead to some of the slight oddities that exist in there. Some of the very small wards, you know, like in Dover, for example, in Dover town, you've got some artifacts of previous boundary changes, and then out in the sort of rural parishes, you've got other artifacts of historic villages with single member wards and the like, that mean that you get an imbalance of democratic representation. So, Chairman, so what I would suggest is that perhaps if we were to go through each of the parishes and just sort of check to make sure that we're happy with them, because there are a few that I'm not completely, personally, I don't agree with. I've got some extra points that might be useful for the committee to consider that perhaps didn't come up in the consultation responses.
I mean, you know, I've got no concerns about going through each one individually. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. I mean, my view would be that, you know, we've got a paper out there and this is only for consultation, the second stage. So it's not that there's any decisions. So it goes to council, then goes out for round 2. But if there are concerns, the only concern I would say, councillor, is though that, you know, I'm not sure that actually any information we bring here today should override any of the public consultation that we've had over that period, because we all know certain things about certain parish councils. But I say, you know, if we want to go through it individually, I don't have any necessary problems. I have a meeting at 3 o'clock, but that's not a problem. Do you want the officer to lead through on each one and then come in? And for speed, or unless you've got it, would it be easy if you just highlighted the ones you have concerns about? Because I'm assuming it's not everyone.
It's not concerns necessarily. I mean, there are a few that I do think it would be useful if maybe the officer could just lead us through the individual and just say, yeah.
In that case, if we perhaps say the name of the parish, what we're recommending, and if members want to stop us, we'll stop at that point, and otherwise we'll move on to the next one in the list. So, Tracy, if you'd like to lead through.
Right, Orcombe, we've recommended keeping at 7 seats. Yeah, Ash keeping at 11.
So yeah,
sorry.
Just on this one. So and I think it might get quicker as we go through, but it might help you to understand why I'm thinking that we should pause here. I think one of the things that is important to consider is like whether or not there are actually competitions for these seats. And here I'm concerned that we've had 15 years without contested elections in the parish. Now, you know, that you don't have to have contested elections, but I do think the point of having a democratically elected council means that the democratic process should work. And here it doesn't strike me that it perhaps has been given a chance to, if you've got no elections and 15 years without them. So I think that, you know, the parish council and the responses we've seen say that they should keep it the same, then probably I'm minded to agree, but I am uncomfortable about the fact that there's no elections, and you know, it feels to me that you know, I don't know whether or not officers can shed any light on that. I don't know whether or not there haven't been any elections because there are 11 candidates every time, or if there are too few, and then there are a number of co-optees after each election, or what the history is here. But that feels to me like the process is perhaps not working as perfectly as it could for residents.
Yeah, it is usually because there's not enough. There's either the exact number of councillors that stand, or there are slightly less. There's only been, I think, 2 parishes in maybe the last 10 years or so where we've had to rerun an election because they haven't even met the quorum. So yeah, it is usually just because they're either got the exact number of councillors or they're 1 or 2 short. Okay, Aylsham up to 14.
Jem, so Jem, just on this one, I mean, clearly the Aylsham area is one where there's significant housing growth and has been over a number of years. The jump is really significant, and I was struck by the fact that there are a lot of responses in here which say that they want to see more councillors, which is at odds with quite a number of areas in the district where there are people who think that there are too many councillors. I guess what would be really helpful to understand is the extent to which the proposal to move up to 14 is a reflection of the expected population numbers in 2031, because the other thing I think we need to have in mind is the likelihood that post LGR we might see a more fundamental sort of review of the way in which the boundaries and numbers work across the district. And the reason I hesitate here is because it feels to me like having 14 parish councillors in a single parish with no wards means that if you've got 2 or 3 people fighting for each of those spots, then you could end up with a ballot paper with 40 odd people on it. Now, I think that's unlikely to happen, but if you look at places like Aylsham and Whitfield, then clearly you've got 14 members in one at the moment and 14 in the proposal. Well, that's the same as, say, somewhere like Deal, which has got 15 over 3 wards. So there are some oddities in here. And I don't know quite how accessible it is to the public if you've got a ballot paper with that many people on it. So I don't know whether or not officers could shed any light on what's going on in Aylsham and the kind of sort of the substance of the requests to increase the size of the parish council, and whether or not the population forecasts, like how, if you were to just look at the population now, for example, how many councillors short would it be based on the NALC recommendations?
Okay, so they've currently got 9, so it would be an increase of 5 councillors up to 14. They had their last contested election was actually last year, 2025, where they had a by-election. There is a lot of expected growth in Aylsham still, I believe. I mean, there's been an awful lot just recently, but I believe there's still more to come. Originally, as part of an overall CGR, we would have looked to warding Aylsham, but obviously it's not possible at this point. So we've just looked at the NALC figures and the responses from the public.
Yeah, I mean, if the public,
Bigger, yeah, it's becoming the size of the town.
yeah, it is
But
big.
warding is definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if the public wants it and if the NALC stuff suggests it, then we should probably do it. But I guess again, it's probably one, if you've got an idea on what you might do with warding in the future, that's probably something we should come back to. But yeah, happy to keep that one.
Capel Fern staying at 9.
Yeah, I mean, the Hermione, I mean, back to the point I guess I landed on earlier, like they haven't had an election since 1991. Now, I don't know, I mean, like, I'll leave it for others to determine whether residents have been well served by the process there. Capel, I mean, this is an average of 200 people per councillor. It's not high. It's not out of kilter with quite a lot of the sort of rural parishes. I don't know whether or not, I can't see in the summary, but I don't know whether or not we've got data on vacancies and how many, if there are any, how often they appear, that might be useful in determining this. Because my inclination here would probably be to reduce the numbers, but you know, clearly I want to make sure we've got all the data before we do anything like that.
Okay, obviously, off the top of my head, I don't have the details of the vacancies, but we can definitely find that out.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think for the purposes of the kind of final paper when it goes to council, it might just be used to have a bit of extra detail on there. And if the parish haven't responded, if we're able to ask if they have any view at all, I don't know.
I think that goes back to the earlier points that the chair made. We've had the consultation. Late responses are not part of that consultation. So we've run our proper consultation. So those that didn't respond in the first consultation, their avenue for response is the second consultation, not in between, because that gives them a very different situation from how we've run the consultation for the members of the public. And we don't want to have this split between two things. There's a second consultation. If you didn't reply to the first, you really should have, but you should reply to the second.
I suppose from my concern, there is a difference between no election and co-opting. I still think if you have no election, it's a shame, but that's a life. It's the co-option bit, and whether we can actually put down whether there's no, you know, when there hasn't been an election since 1991, is that because you, as the councillor says, this is the right number, or is it co-option? The co-option always scares me because the parish council can go co-opt all their mates if they wanted to. And that's not necessarily very democratic. But I don't know whether we can just say that there's been no elections, you know, always the right number of candidates, or they've had to have X number of co-options during the course of.
Yeah, we have got information on co-options going back to definitely back to 2019. So it will cover the last two sets of elections.
Extra detail.
Okay, deal we propose to keep the same. Denton with Wootton.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, so I just think deal. Let's just deal probably deserves a little bit of focus. And I think we'll come on to warmer later when we get down the alphabet. But clearly, from the responses, there are quite a lot of people here who've got views about the fact that the two communities work well together, and they'd like to see the councils merged. You know, that's not, you know, everybody, but it's interesting to see that in there. I think the thing that for me is interesting in here is that the proposals for deal based on the NOUT figures mean that you'd see a difference in balance of the numbers in each of the wards, with Mill Hill potentially seeing 3 extra councillors. I think that was is that right? With a sort of increase in 6 in total across the whole of the town. I mean, if you look at the NOUT numbers on their own and just follow what they say, what you would end up with is Walmer and Deal having something like 37 councillors for the two communities, which is more than we've got for the whole district here at DDC. So that doesn't completely feel right to me. So I think if the town council itself says they don't want to see any change, I'm kind of broadly happy with that. But I do think it's kind of entrenching an imbalance of representation between the different wards, and that's probably something that we need to come back to in a future more detailed CGR, because the population differences between, I mean, based on the forecasts, I think, yeah, population in Mill Hill over 6,000, population in North Deal, which is the smallest of the wards, just under 5,000. So quite big differences with the same number of councillors. Not as big as I have to say in, I think, is it Goodnestone, which we'll come on to, but clearly some differences that given the numbers here, you could potentially address if you thought was appropriate. But if the town council doesn't want to make any change at this point, then I haven't got a strong enough view that we should be doing anything different. Then I mean, Deal is obviously a council you sit on, Councillor Richardson. So
No, I think it works fine as it is.
yeah, okay, fine. Should we move on?
Okay, Denton with Wootton, an increase from 5 to 7.
I'd love to hear a justification.
Yeah.
As it says in the summary, there was only one response received, which suggested increasing the number of seats. And we have had recent parish elections in there in 2019. Unfortunately, we haven't heard from Denton with Wootton Parish Council, so we don't know if they want to remain the same, if they're happy with their numbers, or if they feel that the need for an increase. So we have gone with, for our recommendation for this one, we've gone with the only response that we've received and the NAUC recommended figures.
Yeah, I respectfully disagree. I'd say I think I understand all of those data points, but I think the proposal, which would leave one councillor per 44 residents, seems a bit excessive. So with just the kind of those two data points, my proposal would be that we keep it at 5, unless we get some really strong evidence to the contrary. It seems an oddity to have an increase to 7 in a parish with 300 people living in it.
Don't live in Wootton and Denton, so I don't know the details of Wootton and Denton. So, you know, I think that's why we want the next round of consultation to actually inform, I suppose, for want of a better phrase, the first round. And I'm assuming then some of the parish councillors obviously slept through the correspondence and the wake-up call, may actually, you know, put pen to paper. But I just, my gut feeling is I'm not sure whether it's necessarily for us to turn around and go, actually, as much as only one, you've all had the opportunity. Now, you know, 3 councillors have sat down and said, no, actually, we don't want you to consult on that. So, I mean, yes, I know where you're coming from, and I don't disagree with the basis of it. It's just I'm not comfortable actually reducing the numbers when, you know, I think that should be part of the consultation.
Keeping them the same.
Yeah, sorry, keeping them the same. That's an increase in Wootton and Denton. It's not keeping them the same. Yeah. Oh no, I know where you're coming from, but I just don't know whether it's right for us to get into that level of detail. And I think that's for the second phase. Once we've done the second round, I mean, it goes to us first, the council. We then go out to consult for the second round. That comes back. I presume that makes what's the decision process after that? Sorry.
Essentially, we do the same thing again. I'll summarise all the responses, and you'll get a copy of the summary and all of the responses, and you'll see whether people have agreed with the draft recommendations or if they think they are absolutely ridiculous. They'll tell us one way or the other quite strongly, no doubt, and then it's back to the decision-making process again.
Yeah, and then on to council. Okay.
Just to add, I've had a quick look on the website, and they currently have 5 councillors at Denton, so they do have the maximum that they currently have. So it's not like it's sort of a council of 3 at the moment or anything. So just for information, they are currently at their full 5.
I'm happy to take the proposal, or do we want to add it in let the council, make that decision. But go on.
Well, I mean, I think you should say the same. That's my proposal. I think that, I mean, ultimately, full council needs to validate whatever we propose, but I haven't got enough evidence in front of me that suggests that there is a significant kind of gap in capability or the democratic process needs to be changed here. I mean, we're talking about a parish with 300 people in it with 4, I think that, as I said earlier, 1 to 44 is remarkable. It's not quite the most generous ratio we've got, but we do need to think about that's where I come from here. I understand we've followed the single response we've got from the public, and we've followed the NOUT guidelines, but I think we ultimately have got agency here to make a decision based on what we think is appropriate. As we know the district, we represent the whole of the district, and the individual wards within it, and we've got a sense of how it works, I think, as members. And my view is that it should stay the same.
And then I did hit a 4 there once, but it was a very short boundary. Okay, so there's a recommendation then that it stays the same. Is that seconded? Yeah. Okay. All those in favour? All those against? Woo. Okay, so there'll be a recommendation. So we'll just need then, obviously, for the council, we highlight that this is a deviation from the. Yep. Okie dokie. Dover.
Okay, so Dover, we've recommended to stay the same as well.
Okay, supported by the town council. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think on the NOUC numbers, there would have been a number of areas where there were going to be significant increases. So is this a very similar situation to Deal, where just the council feels that it works fine without any changes? Is that basically the issue?
Yeah, that's basically the issue. They are below the NOUC maximum recommended numbers, but the town council has confirmed that they still work well on those numbers.
Okay.
So the only thing I would observe here, I suppose, is that within one town, and I guess like individual parishes to an extent, if you've got, let's say, 1 to 200 ratios across a parish area, and that's different to a neighbouring town, then I guess as long as within a town everyone feels like they're getting an equal say, then that feels okay. Here we've got in St Rad's, we've got I think 1,000 people per parish councillor, whereas in Brokesley less than half that. Now I know that that's a bit of an artifact because of the boundary change stuff, but that does feel like that's a bit of a problem. I think it might be something that gets solved in a future boundary kind of review, but I don't think it's sustainable that within a single town you could have such an imbalance of representation where people's votes are effectively worth double if they live in one part compared to another. So if the town council are happy with it for now, then I guess I'm fine. But in the longer term, I do think we should be looking at that, because it doesn't sit quite right with me.
Going to Buckland, actually, but that's another subject. So we're happy just to leave it as is, but obviously there are concerns, particularly going forward. Eastry.
Yeah, Eastry is proposed to stay the same at 11.
Aythorne.
Aythorne, we've proposed to stay the same as well.
Okay, okay on that.
I think just very briefly to make the point here that clearly the Barfreston ward is the kind of the oddity in Aythorne because of the tiny number of residents living there, 35 people, but without an ability to change the boundaries or make any kind of other changes, then there's not really anything we can do about that here. So if there's no kind of opportunity to rebalance within the parish, then I don't think there's. I'm happy to leave it as you're proposing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Goodnestone, staying the same at 5.
Right among them.
Great Mundrum. There was an error on the figures here, so it should have said stay the same at 7.
Yeah.
So just on this one, I think this is another one where, given that we haven't had elections since 2003, it'd be useful to understand the situation as regards co-options and so on and so forth when we get to the full council paper.
Guston.
At Guston, we've proposed to stay the same at 7. Hotham also to stay the same at 7. Langdon to stay the same at 7.
On this, sort of ditto from my previous comment, if we've not had elections since the late 70s, then that smells slightly fishy. I mean, not to suggest there's anything untoward going on, but it doesn't feel like democracy is being well served. Although they're saving a few quid on holding elections, clearly. So
they find, sorry, Chair, one of my parishes, and they really do struggle finding people to get on the council. That's their problem. They struggle to get 5. Is it 5 they're after? No, 7. They struggle to get 7 on. That's the problem. Even though they try and encourage people at the Bergen Heights down into Guston, it is a struggle.
Yeah.
So can I suggest that if we haven't done so already, we sort of directly ask Lang. I mean, clearly we've asked them to participate in the consultation, but perhaps we need to be dogmatic in posing that question, because there is an opportunity here for them to right size a council if they're struggling for numbers. They haven't taken the time to respond to the consultation yet, but may do. And so, if district members and officers are able to kind of pursue that, I think that would be helpful, because this is an opportunity to sort that out ahead of elections next May.
I mean, yes, as part of the second sort of round of consultation, we will be exhorting those that haven't responded and those that did respond to the first one to make consultations. I think, obviously, if members, when they're going to these parishes as part of their work, could just pass that message on, that would be appreciated. Langdon itself, in this particular instance, they're currently with 7 councillors, so they're not below their number, but obviously it has been a while since a contested election. So, we take that point on board. I think it comes to a wider point, which we're going to come on repeatedly, which is we're looking at the issue of either encouraging more people to stand to make the current numbers work, or you're in the situation of you're looking to reduce to reflect that people aren't standing. I think both arguably have sort of flaws in approach. And in democracy, we always want as many people standing for election as we can, but we take on board that point.
So Lyddon, a decrease down to 7.
Yeah, and just on this, Chairman, I'm happy with the logic that's in here, happy for us to propose that, but again, clearly they haven't expressed a view in the consultation to date, so I'd be really keen to hear. I mean, as I understand it, and officers might correct me here, but it sounds like there's vacancies existing on this parish council, so the reduction to in the numbers probably wouldn't lead to any practical difference. So I'm happy with that proposal until we hear any evidence to the contrary.
Nonnington we propose to keep the same at 7. Northbourne to keep the same at 7. And Preston to keep the same at 7. Ringwell with Kingsdown to keep the same at 9.
So just on this one, I guess one of the things that would be great to see in a future CGR would be a consideration for the kind of the way that this parish is structured, because it's clearly 2 separate villages, and that isn't reflected in the way that it's warded at the moment, and the needs of the 2 different communities are different, although they share a number of services, it's school and a few other things. I do think that it might not necessarily be because the numbers are high enough, but it does make sense to me that the Ringwell with Kingsdown parish would be well served by 2 separate wards. I don't know actually what the polling districts look like for that area, but yeah, it's all in one, is it? Yeah. So that's probably the only thought that I'd have on that, but the numbers seem fine to me.
Yeah, Ringwell with Kingsdown are 2 separate polling districts. So if you were to ward it at some point, then you would probably use the district, because they follow the parish boundaries. Ripple, we've gone to stay the same at 5. River, no change at 10. And then Sandwich, no change at 16. total.
I think, I mean, so just to dwell on that, I do think, I mean, clearly the rural areas are important, but in the large number of population in the towns, I do think they probably dwell a little bit of discussion. I think the key thing for here for me is the fact that the numbers in the proposal reflect the fact that the population in the two existing wards differ, and again, you end up with a sort of it's not wildly different, but it is different enough that you end up with a sort of an imbalance of representation between the two areas. Now, I think that I actually think population seems to be falling, which sort of differs from a couple of other areas. So I think that there's probably some merit in us having a closer look at it and the sort of boundaries and how they interact with kind of new housing development and other bits and bobs in a future CGR to make sure that Sandwich is well served. The other element I think that Sandwich has, much like, say, Deal and Dover, is that clearly because of its sort of very rich history, then it has a whole load of sort of very unique things that the town council is responsible for that perhaps is unlike lots of other places, and that probably merits having a decently sized council to reflect its historic, ceremonial, etc. roles. So if they want to keep it the same, then happy to go with that, but I do think it's worth us having a closer look at it at some point in the future.
Okay, Shepherd's Well with Coldred, the recommendation is to stay the same. And then we have Sholden, where the recommendation is to stay the same.
I mean, so just on this one, I think that Sholden is one of those communities sort of in the orbit of Deal, so to speak, where there is probably some value in looking at where the boundaries sit between the different bits of the community, between the different settlements. Clearly, we can't do that here, but I think that the kind of clearly the parish council saying keep things the same, that's fine. I know from kind of planning committees, local residents' views, confusion about where exactly the edges of these towns and villages are, that I don't, I think there is an opportunity for us as a council to tidy up some of that sort of important community boundary stuff that perhaps has been kind of eroded over time as either memories have faded or housing has been built in places where it previously was fields. And so, yeah, another point I've just land around the fact that the limited scope of the CGR means we're not able to properly consider some of that stuff, which is a shame.
Yes, yeah, due 2029. St Margaret's and Cliff, no change at 9. Staple, no change at 7. Stourmouth requested to go from 5 to 7.
So could you help? I've got the detail in the pack, but could you just remind me why the parish council wanted an increase here, given they haven't had elections for 30 years and the population's 243 people?
They haven't given a reason as part of their response. They've just asked to increase it from 5 to 7.
I mean, I just think, I mean, if there is a really, really good reason why a community that's such small size needs a bigger parish council, then I think we probably deserve to hear it from the parish council. But if they haven't provided that yet, then I can't see that as a really strong argument apart from the sort of pretty binary NALC guidelines to increasing it to 7. So my proposal would be that we keep it at 5. Unless there's a kind of, and I'd love to hear from Stourmouth to sort of help us understand better why they want to see an increase.
What I would say about the Stourmouth one is when we did the presentation to the town and parish councils on this, they were actually the first voice to speak up at the meeting, and they made this very request to increase their numbers. So it's not something that I think is driven purely by sort of the NALC mathematics. They clearly feel anecdotally that they want an increase. Now, it would have helped if they'd provided evidence to back up why they feel that. What I would say is that they had 5 seats with the uncontested election. They weren't carrying any vacancies, and they still have all 5 seats filled. So there is a demand of sorts. There's certainly to fill the 5. Now, it would have been really helpful if they said there's new housing going in or something like that, and they anticipate growth, but obviously they've not provided us with that information.
Leave and have 7 people interested in getting involved. Okay. So are you recommending we stay at 5?
I am. I mean, I think just to the point you just made, Chairman, if there's been no election since the mid-90s, it doesn't seem to me that there's a sort of competitive kind of demand for spots. I know that parishes don't always work in
I was
quite
going to
that
say
way.
it's not how parishes work, in my opinion. But...
Well, some of them do, but yeah, I understand the point you're making. I'm not saying that I don't think that we should say yes to this. I'm just saying that I'd want to be convinced that it was a good idea. There may well be a really good case for it, but looking at some of the decisions we've made earlier in this meeting about other places with similar sized populations, with similar circumstances around how long it's been since they had a competitive election, I'd just love to hear a bit more from the parish about why.
Proposed and seconded that we reduce. All those in favour? Against? Kept the same. Sorry, I apologise. Sutton?
Sutton, we've proposed to keep the same at 7. Temple Ewell, a decrease from 12 down to 9. Tilmanston to keep the same at 5. And then Walmer is proposed to
Wiping out?
reduce from 15 to 12.
Come on, councillor.
Well, I think that it was really clear from the responses we've had from the public in Walmer in particular, is that there are a number of people with very strong views about the parish council, and I know many of those people and what those views are as the ward member. I think that from my perspective, there are sort of 2 schools of thought around the sort of Deal and Walmer kind of area. One is that ultimately nowadays you'd struggle to tell where one began and the other ended, and the other is that they are actually communities that have got a different history and a different identity, and they have got different things going on in them. And certainly if you look at the events that are organised by each councils, they do differ. They're not in competition with each other. I think that again, the boundary stuff here with the wards is slightly odd, given that you've got a community of 6,500 odd people, or electors rather, with 4 wards, splitting them up, where then the neighbouring town, Deal, has only got 3 wards with sort of twice the number of residents. So there is a sort of oddity there. And if you look at the sort of representation in the proposal, you've got in Deal sort of roughly, what is it, 1 to 800-ish representation, and then in Walmer it's about 1 to 400 in the sort of number of sort of electors per councillor. So it doesn't feel quite right if you wanted to be consistent. I think the NALC proposals would have kept it the same. So here's one where we're proposing to reduce it, which I guess probably be useful to have a bit more info from officers on what the rationale is behind that decision, and whether or not it's just purely about Walmer itself, or if it's about the context in which it sits, or anything else that might be informing it.
It's literally because the majority of responses that came in wanted to reduce the council size. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of them wanted to reduce them to numbers that were not valid. So this was kind of a compromise between, going with what the majority wanted, which was a reduction, but keeping it still within reasonable numbers so that the council should still be able to function. I mean, if the council responds to the second part of the review, then we will know whether or not they can function on those numbers. And obviously, if they tell us that they can't function on reduced numbers, then that's the point when we can look at keeping it the same or whatever they want to do.
I think with the warmer one, which is a little bit more perplexing than some of the others where we haven't had a response, is that they actively voted not to respond to the consultation, which obviously is a little confounding. I know we have discussed this in that Tracy has made repeated attempts to underline the point that if you don't say, we will go with what the majority opinion is, and if you do say, we'll take that into account. So although we are recommending a reduction because that's what the public are asking for, hopefully at the second round we would see a response from Warmer on this. Getting back to the other point about the size of the wards, I mean, I would absolutely agree, without wanting to prejudge a full CGR, you wouldn't expect necessarily for a merged Deal and Warmer to have 4 Warmer wards as a result of a merger. You'd probably be looking at 2 to bring it in line with the Deal wards, but that obviously is something for a future CGR to deal with.
Yeah, I agree, and that's assuming that the boundaries of the edge of the parish remain the same, which, without wanting to rehearse previous debates, clearly they shouldn't, in my opinion, because of the evolution of the settlement boundaries over time, and then sort of absurdity of having bits of Walmer which are actually in Ripple or in Ringwold with Kingsdown and all of that. So there is definitely scope for us to have a look at that a bit more closely. Again, just slightly disappointing we can't do it now, but I'd say I can understand the reason why members of the public might wish to see a reduction in numbers in Walmer Town Council. There have been contested elections there. I think last time round all 4 wards were contested, and my kind of inclination is actually to leave it the same until a bigger CGR can look at the whole of the Deal Walmer area. Just because I think it, notwithstanding the fact that lots of members of the public locally aren't very happy with it, I kind of think that it actually works okay as a council at the moment. So I would, my proposal would be we keep it the same until a bigger review, because there's so many other things that need to be fixed to get the numbers and the wards right.
Understand every decision we make has a consequence. The consequence of them deciding deliberately not to engage with this is that the public have said. So, I'm under no illusions. We go out on the second stage, you'll get an answer. But I don't think we should be doing the work of Walmer Parish Council. I think at the end of the day, the residents, and I know because I've dealt with issues with parish councils over this district, the views of some of the residents have been fairly polarised in Walmer. But my view would be we go out as per the paper for the reasons set out, and then we watch. And I'm convinced I could tell you now exactly what the responses will be, but that's another subject.
Yeah, I was slightly puzzled why they hadn't responded either, and given it's my ward, I asked why that happened, and basically because they were happy with the fact that 15 was right at the moment. Then and that's what was in the proposal, then they thought, well, there's no need to waste time preparing a formal response, so let's not bother. That's my understanding of it. Now, I think that clearly if we go forward with the reduction that's in the paper, then you're right, I'd expect they would respond and they'll say, no, we want to stay the same. So that's why I'm sort of saying perhaps just keep it the same. That's my proposal, which is to keep it the same.
All those in favour of leaving it the same? Well, is it seconded first? I think I know. Right, okay. So all those in favour then of keeping the status quo as in the document? Well, it's got to go to full council anyway. But as I am absolutely convinced, I know what the responses will be, and then someone will go, "Oh, light bulb moment."
Okay, Whitfield, a reduction in numbers to 11. Wingham, keep.
Yeah. So can you just help sort of just explain the sort of rationale behind this? Because I think if you look at Whitfield and Aylsham as two sort of relatively comparable places that are, you know, villages that have been expanded significantly due to major housing growth, kind of the number of people, number of electors in Whitfield's up at sort of 6,000, which is sort of there or thereabouts with Aylsham, and we are proposing to increase Aylsham to 14 and reduce Whitfield to 11. I think that clearly there are some vacancies and what have you in Whitfield Parish Council, but it'd be just great to just sort of get to into the meat of why we think that the two places shouldn't be treated similarly.
The last election in Aylsham, I think I said, was 2025, so it was last year. The last election in Whitfield was 1979. So they've been co-opting people to the council. People haven't had a chance to vote for their councillors since 1979 in Whitfield. And they are currently operating with 11 councillors and 3 vacancies. So we know that they can run the council on 11 vacancies. And whereas the majority of responses for Aylsham were to increase the numbers, the majority of responses wanted to reduce the numbers for Whitfield. So Wingham, we've recommended to keep the same at 9. Woodnesborough to keep the same at 9. And Worth to keep the same at 7.
Yeah, so just on Worth, I mean, clearly you've got another, although slightly less stark than in some other places in the district, another example of two sort of a parish with 2 separate wards where actually the number of people living in one of the wards is really quite small. I think that the I guess the absence of any engagement here is the bit that I'm sort of slightly uncomfortable about, and I don't know whether or not officers can shed any light on the kind of the number of people on the council, how many co-opted when there were last elections, and so on. Because it does feel like there's probably, particularly in I guess maybe the Sandwich Bay ward, yeah, where you've got a proposal of, well, keeping it the same would mean you've got 1 per 62 residents.
So Worth currently has the full 7 councillors on there. The wards for Sandwich were for Worth, were changed with the 2018-2019 district boundaries. So that's something that we've had to kind of work around. But those were the numbers that were given to us. I don't know about off the top of my head about co-options and the like. We do have their last election, 2011 was their last elections.
So I suppose just on this one, it does strike me that if you just look at the sort of ratios, then having only 1 member, for example, representing Sandwich Bay, you'd have roughly the same number of electors per councillor across the parish council if you had, say, only 6 members with 1 in Sandwich Bay and 5 in the Worth Village ward, which would feel fairer in terms of representation. But whether or not that would hinder the council's ability to operate as a parish, who's to say, because we haven't got any response from them. But it does feel to me like if we were the boundary commission, which effectively we are, in terms of performing our functions here for the district, then they would be looking at what's the appropriate kind of number of electors per elected member, and then they'd be working out where the boundaries go. Here, there is an obvious opportunity for us to sort that out. Now, I'm not going to propose that we change it here, but I do think it's worth our kind of speaking to making sure the parish council have responded and justified why they think that they need that number of people, given that it entrenches an imbalance of democratic representation in the parish.
I don't think I would disagree with the broad brush of points. What I would say is that this is created by the Boundary Commission, so they actually put this one into creation when they did the district review. This was one of the parishes they created, so they, for whatever reason, consciously created that split and those number of councillors on there.
So yeah, I mean, I think probably one of the reasons they did that was because they wanted to make sure that they had enough geographically, sort of enough units that they could add together to make the parliamentary constituencies work in terms of numbers, because I think Worth is the bit where the new constituencies are the ones that they've ultimately led to sort of changing in the same way that perhaps when they created, when North Deal was created as a district ward before the 2019 elections, we ended up carving off the northernmost bit of Walmer parish to go into the North Deal ward, because it then made the numbers work in terms of evenness of representation. So I think that's, and it's similar, I guess, with the Rokesley ward in Dover Town. There's a whole load of these sorts of artefacts that serve the purpose of a bigger unit, but ultimately lead to all of this sort of nonsense at a local parish level. Now, I guess there's pros and cons to that, but in this instance, there's an obvious solution here, which could be about having just one member in the Sandwich Bay ward, where you preserve all of the different boundaries, but have it evenly balanced in terms of representation. So, yeah, worth getting Worth to respond to whatever the next consultation is. That's all from me, Chairman.
Also, we'll recommend to council the recommendations in light of those adopted with the amendments that have gone through today. And I think it is important to reiterate to all parish councils that we would like them to engage with phase 2. You happy with that? Sorry, council.
Yes, can we reiterate that when we're at full council from you as well?
Yeah, no.
Chair, only on the grounds that then everyone knows they've got to go out to their parishes and start knocking at the door.
Yep.
Thank you.
Those in favour then? Thank you. Thanks very much. That ends the meeting.